Commission, the April 24th meeting. On the agenda today, we have items of interest from commissioners, followed by the director's report. Following that will be the consent agenda, and on that is consideration of the minutes from April 10th. That will be followed by a briefing on the residential infill project, and then another briefing on manufactured dwelling park zoning project. And our goal is to adjourn at 7:30. Items of interest. Chris.
So I've had the privilege of spending the last two afternoons helping interview the candidates for the new youth commissioner term. And I am blown away by the quality of the candidates. So I am confident that we will continue the strong tradition we have of excellence in that position, and also very challenged to figure out who to recommend to the next round.
That's great to hear. Anybody else? Eli?
I was in a working group yesterday with Portland has been a leader in accessory dwellings. Yesterday there was a meeting with Metro and 11 different jurisdictions planners, all updating their ADU codes at the same time to comply with the state requirement. We have been leaders, and Tigard already has a code proposed that has 2 ADUs per lot. Talent Oregon has already submitted to the state of Oregon a similar code like that. And we're starting to hear jurisdictions come to make progress on making this housing choice more available. And part of that's coming up in the residential infill. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Andre?
I just wanted to follow up on the garbage haulers rate increase that went through, but more importantly, I went to council and asked that they come up with a number of options supporting what we had asked staff, and council was supportive of that. And the mayor, I also asked about the plastic silverware, and he was already ahead of us and has said that he's already working on that. So I expect to hear that soon.
Great. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, we have a fellow alum from University of Oregon, I believe, that went to school maybe before or after Susan, Tim Beatley, who's director of the Biophilic Cities project out of the University of Virginia, and he's going to be here on May 31st at 5 o'clock. Actually, he'll be at the Institute for Sustainable Solutions at PSU talking to other cities about them signing on to the Biophilic Cities Network, which is an international group of cities. Biophilia, first proposed by E.O. Wilson, as the innate, hardwired connection people have to nature, and so he's going to give us a presentation on that. And the following day, he and Richard Louv, who many of you know, who wrote Last Child in the Woods, will be doing a major meeting with MODA Health, specifically talking about the importance of access to nature for human physical and mental health. So,
Sounds great. Anybody else? No? Susan, director's report?
Just a quick item. In front of you, you have our new strategic plan, which is a 3-year plan for 2018 to 2020. And I'm feeling really good about it. Several of you were interviewed as among a lot of the other stakeholders probably more than 6 months ago. It continues our focus on equity and affordable housing and middle wage jobs and climate action. And a lot of other issues. I think what I will do is find some time on an agenda, 20 or 30 minutes at the most in May or June, and we can walk through it a little bit so you guys can see where we're headed. And you obviously have given us lots of input over the years, and especially in the past few months, so appreciate that.
Sounds great. Consent agenda. Consideration of the minutes from April 10th. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. That's approved. So let's get going. Residential infill project briefing.
Good afternoon. We are excited here today to present the residential infill project. This is a project that's been 2 years in the making, and we have been working heavily with the community on bringing the best proposal forward that we can. My name is Sandra Wood. I'm with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and with me today is Morgan Tracy, the project manager for residential infill. And behind me are many of my colleagues that have contributed a lot to this project too. So Joe Zender's in the audience, and Tyler Bump, our economic development specialist, if we have questions for them. In addition, some 2 people here from the Housing Bureau, Jesse Connor and Matt Chabold. And I wanted to also thank all of our other colleagues that have helped shape this proposal, including our district liaisons and our GIS team and our management team, et cetera. So we're here representing the team. It's not just the two of us working on the project. So we're excited to share the proposal with you today. And in a nutshell, what we have is a proposal that allows more housing units to be built in residential neighborhoods, but only if they meet and follow the new size limits that we're proposing. So that's what you can expect to see. And with that, I'll remind you that in February and March, we came before the commission with just some background information on infill and housing issues. And you probably remember that on February 13th, we talked about the housing development trends in Portland. We shared the residential infill project's economic background. Later in February, we came to summarize some of the issue overview and the project background. And in March, our colleagues shared the social equity development strategy and a displacement risk analysis and methodology that all led into this proposal today. So we won't be sharing all of that information today. And if people from the public are interested, all of these are on our website and the video can be viewed. So what we wanted to go over today is just an introduction, again, to the project, explain what process we've been through so far, and then I'll hand it over to Morgan, and he'll walk through the what of the proposals, like what are we proposing, because we have explained a lot of the why of what's being proposed. And then finally, we wanted to take some time to talk about the overlay zone map methodology and the 5 steps that we took around that, because you'll be hearing a lot of testimony about that, and we want to make sure that you understand the methodology that we applied to develop the overlay map. So first, just to get us organized, we have several project deliverables. Everyone should have, and for members of the public, we have summaries in the back there, but an 8-page summary, we're going to be working off of that today. The staff report, which is volume 1, is organized around those same 11 proposals in that summary, so you can follow along with either one of those. Volume 2 contains, which looks like this, contains the staff, the zoning code amendments. So this is all Title 33 zoning code strike through underline like you're used to seeing. And finally, we did not print out for the commission, but there is a volume 3, and that includes the appendices to the report. And in that appendices, we have the first appendix is about the guidance from the comp plan. There are many policies in the comp plan, and we've repackaged the ones that we think are most pertinent to this conversation. Another one that I want to draw your attention to is economic analysis that we hired a consultant, Jerry Johnson from Johnson Economics, to do. And then 2 other ones that I wanted to highlight is that the detailed map refinements are in the appendices that you're welcome to take a look at. If we have questions about those properties, we might refer to those appendices. So those are the project deliverables. I think we're all familiar with this map. Hopefully, this is a zoning map of Portland. This project is about the single dwelling zones, which are the yellow zones shown on this map. With the proposal that we have in front of you today, delivers on several solutions to issues. Current rules allow for houses to be built that are quite larger than existing houses. And what you should see after this if this proposal goes into effect is it'll result in smaller houses that better fit existing neighborhoods, like these houses. Currently, as we've described, the city is built, or projects being built in the city are either multi-dwelling growth, like the ones in the Wright building, or single-family houses. And this proposal will allow more housing choices, like this duplex in an infill lot in the city. Current rules about narrow lots allow for narrow houses in areas where people don't expect them, and the proposal includes clear and fair rules for narrow lot development that would result in something like this for attached houses. But those are the technicalities that Morgan will get into, and I just wanted to remind everyone, because you'll hear a lot of testimony and some very passionate testimony from community members that this project is really about people. And we heard from Portlanders who want more opportunities to live in great neighborhoods, who are concerned about affordability and the lack of housing opportunities, not just for themselves, but for aging parents, for students, adult children who can't move back to Portland because it's unaffordable, and for newcomers who contribute to our community, like teachers and nurses and people on that income scale that aren't able to afford the city anymore. So as you think about these people, oh, that I didn't realize that turns. Um, you'll need to balance multiple goals, just like that top right there. This is what I was referring to in the appendix of the comprehensive plan goals that we distilled down for this project. I'm just going to read through them because I think it's really important that when we look at these, we are trying to accomplish all of these goals. We're just starting at the top, we're trying to provide diverse housing options. We want to support housing affordability and extend access to amenities, and location does matter for household prosperity. We want to be resource efficient and have housing that's environmentally sensitive. We want to avoid increasing the risk of displacement for our most vulnerable populations. We want to allow homes that are adaptable over time. They should be economically feasible, so the rules that we develop, somebody will actually build them. We want those rules to be clear rules for development, so everyone knows what to expect and what can be built. And we want new development to also fit the neighborhood context. So those are all derived from the new comprehensive plan goals. Moving along to process, as I said, we've been working on this for 2 years. We worked with the stakeholder advisory committee for over a year. And then we developed the concept report. We had numerous questionnaires and open houses during that concept report period, and took it to City Council. They heard testimony about it and they accepted a concept report in December of 2016, and then sent us to write the zoning code and develop the map, which is what we've been doing for a while. And then we published a discussion draft report in October of 2017, did 2 months worth of outreach, and incorporated a lot of the feedback that we heard. And here we are with a proposed draft, and have hopefully have the public ready to provide you with a thoughtful testimony. This is just by the numbers. I won't go through these numbers, but as you can see, it has garnered quite a bit of attention from many stakeholders. Recently, we have started sending the notices for your public hearings. We sent out 135 public notices that look like this, and many of you probably received one of these that shared what people's existing zoning was and really pointed them to the website to learn more, and told them if they have the A overlay or not. We've been fielding a lot of questions about that. I think we've received 600 questions so far. We're doing 6 drop-in hours at the libraries, and we've had 2. The next one is on Thursday night to answer questions for the public so they understand the proposal, so they can provide testimony for your consideration. And that is where we are as far as process. I'll hand along to Morgan to describe the proposals.
And I do apologize for that spinning top. That was my idea. So we're going to be working off this 8-page summary, which goes through our 11 proposals. So if you want to follow along, that's great. The project consists of 3 key topics. We're talking about the scale of houses, housing choice, and narrow lot development. For the first topic, scale of houses, the first proposal revolves around limiting the size of houses, and you may be familiar with this image. So on the left-hand side there, we have sort of a typical older Portland home at about 1,500 square feet. If you build the maximum volume you could today on a 5,000 square foot lot, it would be something close to 6,700 square feet. We have not seen homes built that large. The largest house in 2017 was about 4,700 square feet, and that's sort of an outlier. But it is important to note that when we do have current situations where we're building duplexes like corner lot duplexes, we are seeing structures that are approaching 6,000 square feet. So this is still a relevant volume to be thinking about. Our proposal would impose a size limit of about 2,500 square feet on an R5, 5,000 square foot lot. FAR is good because it maintains flexibility. It establishes a maximum size, but still allows you a lot of variety in how you allocate that space, either in 1-story or 2-story or narrow 2-story. There's also the potential for increased yard area. So the top image there is showing the current code allowance, 3 floors, each 2,250 square feet each. The proposed size limit on the left is showing what you could do if you wanted to spread all that out across the lot. It leaves a small little increment of about 250 square feet left over. So if you really wanted to capitalize on the full FAR allowance, you're more inclined to stack it like you see, 1,250 square foot on 2 stories and leaving a larger backyard. This slide is just comparing the different FAR proposals for R7, R5, and R2.5. The orange house in those examples is current code. The green is showing where our proposal is. What's really kind of key to note here out of all of these numbers is in the R2.5 zone, we've bifurcated the FAR between detached and attached houses. So if you are building an attached house, you would have a higher FAR, 0.7 FAR. If you're building a detached house, it would be a lower FAR of 0.5, so more similar to the R5 zone. This is a little bit in anticipation of a future topic that we talk about the narrow lots later, but I'll circle back to that. One of the issues that we're hearing from our outreach is around what we count for FAR, what's included, what's excluded. The proposal has landed on excluding basements, basements are now defined as the floor that is partially below grade with at least 50% of the combined wall area of that floor being below grade. And another way to think about that is if you look at that image, something that was like a daylight basement with 100% below grade on one side and 0% on the other side and 50% on each of the 2 sides would still be 50% combined and still be called a basement. So I think you will be hearing testimony about that. We also are excluding portions of low attics, so where you have a ceiling height that's below the minimum that the building code allows for habitable space, that doesn't count as floor area because you really can't be using it as your floor area. We are also talking about revising how height is measured. So currently the code measures height from the highest grade around a house to the midpoint of a roof. The proposal would switch that to measure from the lowest grade to the midpoint of a roof. So this better reinforces that relationship between the grade and the house and doesn't result in overly tall buildings. This is more reinforcing the 2.5 to 3-story height limits that the zone anticipates. The third proposal looks at improving the R5 front setbacks to better reflect those of adjacent houses. So this proposal calls for increasing the setback from 10 to 15 feet in the R5 zone. It is not increasing the setback in the R2.5 zone, just for clarity. But for the R7, R5, and R2.5 zones, in each of those zones, if an adjacent house is sitting closer than the required setback, you would be able to bring your house up in line with that adjacent house. So you have an ability to reduce your setback to match your adjacent neighbor. The fourth proposal relates around improving building design. So we are looking at limiting how high the front door or the porch can be above the grade to 4-foot distance. This is to prevent sort of the second floor entries to the main entrance. Allowing for more flexibility for the eaves to project from 1 foot to 2 feet into the side yard setbacks. And another proposal that we'll kind of circle back on relates to parking. We have parking proposals in each of our topics, but for the scale of houses, where you have a lot with a house, a duplex, or a triplex that abuts an alley, parking will not be required on that lot. And this is not just single dwelling zones, but all zones with a house, duplex, or triplex. If you propose to have parking, the parking must come from the alley. So this is intended to address situations where we have partially improved alleys or unimproved alleys, where a forced requirement to require alley access in all cases could lead to some fairly disruptive improvements in the alley. So this provides a choice. You can use the alley for access like it was designed for. That may mean some level of improvements. If that is too hard of a burden to overcome, then you are not required to have parking. So this image is just showing sort of how this would relate or play out in a few different scenarios with houses and duplexes and triplexes, with intended parking on the alley, with a number of on-street parking spaces being retained. So this is, again, to encourage fewer curb cuts, better pedestrian safety, better front yards, and maintain on-street parking opportunity. So that was a flashbang, but that ends our scale topic. If you have any questions further questions about those.
So before we go into any questions, I would like to read kind of a statement from the commission, which I should have read before we started, but so forgive me. So this is just a general statement regarding potential conflicts of interest on the commission. While it is not clear whether the proposed changes create a potential conflict of interest for Planning Sustainability Commission members because the changes affect such a broad class of property owners in single-family zones, in the interest of transparency, we have the following declarations. Commissioners Oswell, Baugh, and Backrack do not own properties in single-family zones in Portland. All other PSC commissioners own between 1 and 3 properties that are in single-family zones. So with that, thanks for bearing with me on that. If there's questions, we can go ahead and let people start their discussion. Any questions on this first topic? Chris?
So a couple. First on the 15-foot setback. Do we have a view as to how the increased setback might change the form of the rest of the lot in terms of things like tree preservation or how big your backyard is? What's the consequence of adding the extra space in front?
You bet. So there, obviously with an increased front setback, there is a trade-off to the rear yard. But this is a little bit to address. We had in the R5 zone a 15-foot required setback prior to 1981, and we've had a lot of development sort of to that standard. We've had some recent infill development that's happened where the new houses are sitting what we call proud of the houses next to them. In an optimal situation, we'd like to sort of reinforce that front yard continuity of homes. The impact, so one of the reasons we've pulled back on an increased setback in the R2.5 zone is those lots are smaller, tend to be shallower. So they can be as small as 40 feet deep. So when you're talking about a 15-foot front setback and a 5-foot rear setback, there's not much left for the house. For an R5 lot, a typical lot generally is about 100 feet deep. So if we think about 15 feet, a 30-foot deep house, 40 feet wide, fitting your 1,200 square foot footprint. A little separation for an ADU, a 20-foot deep ADU, a 5-foot rear yard setback. We still have about 20 feet of backyard space back there. So it's not to say there is no impact to the backyard. That is a trade-off in terms of trying to reinforce this continuity of the front yard.
And is that 15-foot standard adjustable if there are considerations of tree preservation?
Thank you. Yes. So current allowances for setbacks would allow for that setback to be modified for tree preservation.
Okay. My second question is on the topic of parking, since you've broached that. And if there's a more appropriate time for you to answer this, as you've given us more context, feel free to say so, and I'll be happy to wait. So as I read the code, there were a number of places where parking is waived, a number of places where it says, if you're doing parking, you must do it this way. Mm-hmm. I'm curious what's left where we're requiring parking. So we waived it in a number of cases, but I don't think everywhere. So, curious about what's left. And if you want to answer that later, I'm good with that.
That's perfect tee up. We've got a slide that'll cover that towards the end of the presentation.
Yep. Real quick question, just following up on what Chris was asking. Could you explain, so was the reason we had gone away from a setback of 15 feet due to the fact that we had increased allowable scale, a larger scale at some point, and now that we're going back down in scale? Or, I mean, what caused that change? We don't know.
I'm not sure.
Okay. Fabulous. We can move on. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. I'd kind of like to hear a little bit more the thinking and background on the size limitation. In reading through all the testimony, both from the previous version and this version, I didn't see anyone say it's great and you should go smaller. Virtually all the testimony is it's too small. I mean, I think there was, if I could characterize a lot of testimony, there seems to be a recognition that some limitation might be appropriate. But and again, a couple of facts I think I'm recalling correctly. I think the average size single family house was 2,800 square feet. So and there's a lot of testimony about there's a marketplace. If I'm wrong, correct me, but
I think that's for new
New.
construction, not the average size house for
Well,
existing houses. in
right. So
Portland.
that's new
Yeah.
construction. So obviously the market is driving something bigger than 2,500 square feet. We heard a lot of testimony of different ideas for how to limit the house, but all of them were the 2,500 is simply too small. Give me a sense of why you landed there and why you feel that's still the right number, despite what I'm reading is a lot of persuasive testimony. We really need to make it a little bigger.
Well, I think you may be persuaded to make it bigger. You will also, I anticipate, hear testimony the opposite direction, which is fine. We are sort of hearing concerns on both sides that by reducing the size to 2,500 is restricting some of the opportunity for additional housing types or just flexibility in an existing or for a new house. But we're also hearing that it's out of scale, out of character with the 1,500 square foot homes that we're trying to still be respectful to. There's a little bit of science behind the FAR in that we tested it against the different zones and different lots and different houses that already exist with the objective of not trying to create an inordinate amount of non-conforming situations. So you don't want to set it too low to make everybody non-conforming, and you don't want to set it too high that it doesn't really have any sort of impact or effect. So where we landed was somewhere in the middle.
And I think one thing that helped us think about what size limit was that we thought 2.5 stories was a reasonable size house. When we were talking with the stakeholder advisory committee, some people wanted it lower, some people wanted it higher, but we were like 2.5 stories is pretty reasonable. And then when you start working on a 5,000 square foot lot and doing the side setbacks and considering the increased front setback of 15 feet and something for a detached accessory structure that started putting up place for the floor plate of the building, like setting a number for the floor plate of the building, and you get to 2,500 square feet. But
I think one last consideration as we sort of get further into the housing choice proposals, there are some provisions that speak to bonuses that as we work through the different zones with the different FARs, we needed to also be cognizant of where our multi-dwelling zones pick up in the FAR and try to maintain that continuity between single dwelling zones, smaller scale, and where multi-dwelling zones pick up. But whether it's concrete, no, that's really a question for discussion.
One last follow-up. So is the goal in setting this restriction neighborhood context? We want to be sure we're respecting and being consistent with the majority of house sizes that are out there, or is it more, I guess I'll stop there. I mean, that struck me as that's what you're trying to accomplish. Is that a fair?
That's the main goal. The comprehensive plan calls about design context, neighborhood context, and that's why that's on the wheel. And we heard loud and clear from many community members that the new development that was occurring in neighborhoods was demolishing a small house and a very big house was being built in its place. And like the first slide that Morgan shared, we kept hearing complaints that people were maxing out the development potential, and we calculated, well, how, with the setbacks, in essence, our current zoning code counts the negative space. It counts the setbacks from the sides, building coverage. It doesn't count the actual building itself. And we were surprised to find that 6,750 square foot amount floor area would be allowed under current zoning rules. And so then we started working from there.
Chair, if you'll indulge me, one last question on this topic. BDS was concerned about the difficulty from their standpoint, processing permits and building codes, about using FAR. And I'm wondering, obviously, to the lay person who might want to build a house, FAR is a little bit of a confusing concept. Is there a reason what you're trying to accomplish couldn't work with just designating the square foot of houses, whether it's by zone or whether it's you can't, the limit is a 2,500 square foot house, including or not including the basement, or including or not including an attic, or just, why did you land on FAR as a better way to manage scale in a single family zone rather than just setting square footage?
Square footage of what?
The house, the building.
Rather than a
You
proportionate, just be a
use
fixed number.
square footage as
Oh,
your
I
example.
see
So you
what you
said
mean. Just
the
a
regulation,
flat, like
yes,
an absolute
FAR.
number, not a percentage.
Yeah, right.
See.
So as much as you're struggling with whether this FAR is the right number, picking a number of square feet would also be arbitrary. And it's a challenge, right? What is the right size for a house? I think one of the benefits of FAR is it's really relative to the lot size. It's keeping the house in proportion to the lot. A huge house on a huge lot still doesn't look out of place and out of context. A small house on a small lot, similar. So there's that ability to sort of vary these things. FAR is also another powerful tool to encourage or discourage certain things. So we can count or not count garages. We can bonus or not bonus for different objectives like affordability. So it's useful in those aspects. I think one way we have tried to address BDS's concern about the complexities of FAR for existing homeowners to provide one sort of addition, 250 square foot addition, where they do not have to go through the mathematics of calculating their floor area. Now, that's not going to cover everybody's needs, but it is something that, one, makes it easier for applicants with existing houses to make an application, and two, it provides a little extra incentive for people that have existing houses because they have this ability to go above the FAR cap.
So that is like a free 250 square foot addition for an existing house.
Right.
Regardless
And I think
of,
there's two other things that we did to in response to BDS's concerns. The other one was for detached accessory structures, that the FAR is calculated separate from the house. So imagine you're coming in with a detached garage. You don't have to calculate the size of your house because it's decoupled from each other. The 15% building FAR limit on the detached structure is by itself. The third thing that I think Morgan and the code writers did was define what a basement is and use that definition throughout the code the same.
thank you.
Eli, Ben, Andre, Mike, Chris.
For detached accessory structures, and I guess in general FAR, that's measured to the outside of the building. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it was raised to me a good question, I think, related to accessory dwellings. You can go 800 square feet currently.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it looks like you go to 750 square feet, or actually maybe 680 square feet or something like that by the time you lose the wall area. And then the R2.5 zone, it might say 375, but based on the way ADUs are currently counted, it'd be more like 320 or something by the time you lose the wall area. And you lose more area if you have thick walls for good insulation. So I'm just wondering whether it feels like this drives down the opportunity for detached accessory dwelling units at least 100 square feet from what's currently allowed. I wanted to see if that's accurate. And maybe first that, and I've got a couple others.
So the definition that ADUs use is something called living area, which is slightly different than floor area. They're measured different. They count or exclude different square footages based on how an attic is built, how a basement is used. And there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. So if you talk about ADUs, the size limit for ADUs, and putting that in a 750 square foot FAR structure, your resulting square footage is something less, like you're talking about, is 680 something square feet. So if the objective is to ensure that we have accessory structures that are large enough to accommodate a full 800 square foot ADU, that would be something we would want to modify. And there are some considerations on how you do that, whether it's related to the lot size or not, or whether it's sort of a guaranteed certain minimum amount of square footage. So the current code has that discrepancy, the current proposal, but that's something the commission could change.
And related to parking, if I read it right, if you have parking in a garage attached to the house, that's included within the house's FAR. If it's outside the house, it gets its own FAR for a detached structure. I'm wondering whether you expect that would drive a lot of detached garage construction, because if you're building a new house, you want to maximize the FAR on the house, you're always going to put the garage as a separate structure. Do you expect that?
I think that makes sense to me. but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Detached garages are pretty flexible, or future ADU conversions, perhaps. And it helps break up that size and massing of the house by moving that vehicle area outside.
Okay, I'll toss in two more quickies, I think. One of them is why not R10 for the updated limits?
We didn't hear a big problem statement coming from R10 zone lots, so we didn't extend it to R10 zone lots.
Okay.
I mean,
And-
that's
Yeah, and I don't think there's not a lot of development potential in R10 either, but we could consider that.
And the last one, sort of a thought, is that by introducing, right now we have setbacks and building coverage basically. And I think building coverage is pretty easy to comply with historically. The 50% for single family and 15% for accessory structures. Once we lay on the FAR, then it feels like there's a lot of incentive to do 2 or more story houses. And that one option might be to become more flexible on the floor area. On the lot coverage than we have right now. This is especially true for accessory dwellings, so that you actually end up getting some one-story structures which are more accessible. It feels like accessory dwelling units are the defining case where you're trying to build something, you got a floor area cap. You got a 15% of your lot area can be for an accessory structure, and you have an FAR constraint. You're almost always going to go 2 stories to not exceed the lot coverage requirement. Same thing for houses, and that it might be okay in the situation to be more flexible on the lot coverage, just so that, because that's less looking at people's yards. It's you're already constraining the FAR, and that hasn't been touched in this code update. But I wonder whether it should be looked at.
You could look at it. It also increases the amount of impervious surface and less space for backyard and green space for trees. It increases the length of the house along the side for the neighbors too. So there's definitely trade-offs to that. We don't see that many single story houses being built, and as lots get smaller, it's pretty logical that people will start building up.
Okay.
I think Andre's probably ready.
This is something I'm just struggling with. As we think about home ownership and we think about rentals relative to this, the utilities going to each one of those, because now we potentially have 2, 3 owners on a piece of property that we had 1 to water, sewer, and power and all those things. Have we thought?
So you might be jumping ahead.
Okay.
Because we haven't proposed that yet. Right, because these are about the scale of single houses so far. But yes, when we talk about
the scale of the single house, even if you put 2 1,200 square foot homes, so it says that you stack 2, you potentially could put an upstairs unit and a downstairs unit, and you have 2 utilities to that same unit, depending on how the builder builds it. I'm thinking through the utilities, because many of these neighborhoods don't have underground utilities in terms of power. So now maybe you're adding a second line overhead, and then the underground utilities, water and sewer. And when you start thinking about distances that you can't plant trees between water and sewer or something. And then you get to the ADUs down the road. But it's a general question.
So how does that work now, Commissioner Bott? I mean, duplexes are being built right now in multi-dwelling zones and duplexes on corners. So,
there's a
and it could be
standard-
stacked duplexes.
There's a standard today, but now potentially you could add ADU or do something else. And I'm trying to understand, or have we talked to all the utilities and thought about that in terms of, because it seems to me you're going to have additional lines coming to the homes.
So we have been coordinating with the other infrastructure bureaus, BES, water, transportation, on some of the implementation issues, but I don't think our conversations didn't get down to the detail of service lines. We can look into that and get back to you.
Thank you.
I think we still have a policy that states we want to go from 27% tree canopy to 33%. And this is a very large swath of the city. And so I'm just pointing out that I've heard a lot of concern from folks, as has apparently Chris, regarding the potential for significant loss of urban forest canopy. So to the extent that we can, and you reference the fact that the setback could be flexible if it were to protect tree cover. So I'm looking for as much flexibility as we can when we talk about trade-offs. We got today will not be an uncommon temperature in the future, and we've got a major issue with urban heat island, climate change, adapting to climate change. So I just want to see us have as much flexibility as we can to ensure we're not losing when we say we want to increase urban forest canopy.
I think that's an important consideration when we're talking about how we modify our building coverage limits, because those two are, space for trees and building coverage are kind of things that are at odds with each other a little bit.
So I want to follow up on Jeff's question about the policy objective of picking a smaller house size. So you discussed neighborhood compatibility, but then you also dropped in at the tail end the demolition issue. So I guess my question is, to what extent is that 0.5 FAR about aesthetic compatibility of having similar building sizes, and how much is it about an economic limit that's intended to cause less demolitions? How do those factors play against each other, or do they work together?
Well, I think the answer is they do work together, but for our proposal, we came up with the proposal first and then ran the economic analysis. What's interesting about that analysis is it had the effect of reducing the amount of demolitions, with the other consequential effect of had the effect of reducing the overall number of demolitions with the reduced amount of redevelopment potential with that FAR limit. But it wasn't designed for that. It just had that effect, had that consequence or result. But one thing we learned through that process is the more you increase the FAR, the more redevelopment potential there is, and the more it's constrained, the less there is.
I would also like to piggyback on that, and this is maybe a little bit to the way you described it, Sandra, about kind of looking at a 2.5-story home and using that to kind of set it. And the way you described that seems to be somewhat setting a certain area aside in the rear yard for greenery. Let's put it that way. Were there comments made from the public and the feedback that you got regarding concerns about houses kind of fronting or siding, let's say, their neighbor's backyard? Like, was it more, when there was scale and compatibility questions, was it more about the front facade of the house, or was it just as much about how much that house intrudes in people's backyards?
It was both. When we were thinking about the 2.5-story house, partially we set that because there are many neighborhoods that have 1.5-story houses, bungalows, 1-story with a half attic. Many community members said that's what the context of my neighborhood is, and that's what houses should be in my neighborhood, is 1.5-story houses. We didn't think in a growing city, which is much of, with some of our other goals of trying to have houses being built that are adaptable over time and that can have a home office in it, and maybe have just a personal home office or a small business in it as they're doing home occupations, that 1.5 stories was reasonable. So we set 2.5 stories. Then we talked about the front setback. And then I think most people would agree that the bigger the backyard, the better. But the house needs a depth also. So pretty soon you start setting that house depth, and it leaves some space in the backyard. And if we wanted to encourage the detached garage as opposed to an attached garage in the front, then having some more flexibility in the backyard was important also. So does that? answer your question.
Yeah, I guess I'm
But we
somewhat just
heard a
trying to
lot.
poke on trying to
Mhm.
understand the backyard situation. Because,
Mhm.
for instance, if you could do a detached garage in the backyard, you could also do an attached garage that comes off the alley in the back too, that causes a longer, narrow house. That's why I was
Yeah.
curious about feedback about neighborhoods feeling about, let's say, like Eli was getting at, if it was all one story
Mhm.
and kind of went further into the backyard, were there people that had angst over that? Or not necessarily? Was it
Yes.
okay?
Yes, and we heard those, and I think you heard testimony about that when we did the accessory structures project also, and how tall that back structure can be in people's backyards where they feel that that's where they gain the privacy too for that lot. So we heard concerns on definitely on both ends.
Okay.
We prioritize, I'll have to say, in our height measurement proposal, we prioritize the front facade as being the facade that most people experience, where people are walking by and what's really contributing to the public realm and a good urban design. So in our proposal to measure height from the low point instead of the high point, the low point is generally in the front of the house versus the high point, which is in the rear of the house. So by measuring height from there, you're in essence lowering the whole house. So in our thinking, our prioritization was to the front facade and not to the sides of the rear. And that helped us move forward, I think, with the height proposal that we brought forward.
Okay, that helps. If it's okay, I think I'm going to have them go ahead and move on to the next segment. If we've got kind of follow-up questions, maybe we can catch up later.
You bet. This next part gets even more interesting, so this is good.
Fabulous.
So we've talked about setting the size of the structure right, getting the scale of that structure right. Now we're moving into housing choice. So we're really asking, if we have a structure like this, what's wrong with having a second front door? Clever. So you're probably familiar with this transect. This is the middle housing example. Shows middle housing types between detached single homes to duplexes, townhomes, multiplexes, and mixed-use buildings on the far right. The smaller scale side of these housing types is the residential infill project, and you'll be hearing soon about the Better Housing by Design, which is tackling sort of that middle range, and you've already dealt with the mixed-use zones. I think it's important while we talk about additional housing types to talk in context of what's currently allowed. So in single dwelling zones throughout the city, you are currently allowed to have a house with an ADU inside the house or a house with an ADU outside the house. And on corners, you can have a duplex. The additional housing types that are allowed, we're talking about 2 ADUs with a house, one inside, one detached, duplex, the same size as the house with or without a detached ADU, and on corners going to a triplex. For our parking proposal in the A, duplexes, triplexes, and homes with 2 ADUs, no parking will be required, but it is still allowed. So this image is just showing a number of different varieties of ways to accommodate that parking. It may be interesting to note the middle lot there that shows the duplex with the shared driveway. We've heard some concern expressed by folks. The Transportation Bureau is requiring that we have a narrowed and shared driveway apron to sort of limit the impacts on on-street parking. The effect of that is pushing the duplex back approximately 27, 28 feet. So there's an urban form sort of trade-off to that. So it's just a thing to note, but the bottom line is the parking is not required in these situations.
Can I clarify? Is for the primary dwelling, would it be required or not?
No parking. So as long as you've got one of those additional housing types, the house and 2 ADUs, the duplex with or without an ADU, or a corner lot triplex, no parking is required for the site.
Okay. But if you just build one house, you'd have to have a spot.
That's right. And we'll come back to that with Chris's question. So another part of the proposal is including when there are 3 units on the site, at least one of them would be required to be visitable, which means a no-step entry into the dwelling, bathrooms and halls with wider doors, and a small area to socialize on that floor. So this is really about providing for options for folks that have mobility impairments or are aging adults and our aging community, and spouses that have recently broken their legs. So we're talking about these additional housing types in select areas, and so that's about this map, the A overlay. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here because Sandra's going to walk through the specific methodology, but we can circle back with questions on that when she gives that part of the presentation. We've also added incentives for affordability. There are two options. The first provides a small increment of additional FAR. So to attain this additional FAR, you would either make one of the 3 units affordable to those making up to 80% of MFI, or when you have 3 units on the site, a fee could be paid in lieu per square foot of additional FAR. So what this example is showing, just some R5, 5,000 square foot lot example, this means that a house with 2 ADUs or duplex could be up to 3,000 square feet. So that 0.10 FAR gets you an additional 500 square feet. On the triplex, the FAR is combined, and so the total for that entire structure would be 3,750. The second option allows for a 4th unit on corner lots only. So in this case, one of the 4 units would be required to be affordable to those making 80% MFI, but there is no fee in lieu option for this, alternative for this option. We also included some flexibility for historic resources to encourage the adaptive reuse of historic structures. And to do this, we use both carrots and sticks. So FAR for the site may be combined for greater flexibility between the house and accessory structures. So this means if you have a small house, it would give you the ability to have larger detached accessory structures, or if you wanted to combine all your FAR into a single structure, a single house, you could do that. There are additional flexibility in how the units are arranged. So an existing house could be converted into a triplex even though it's not on a corner. You could have 2 ADUs that were detached from the house or 2 ADUs that were inside the house. And on the stick side, we have additional limits on alterations to existing historic resources that set basic limits to how much you can add up, how much you can excavate out, how much you can add off the back before you trigger the need for historic resource review. And that would apply mostly to conservation resources and ranked HRI, historic resource inventory properties. Historic designated landmarks and contributing structures in historic districts are already subject to historic resource review, so that those additional limits are kind of irrelevant. Another stick that we have is when you have a conservation resource or historic resource and you've demolished that resource on the site, you've basically removed your ability to utilize the additional housing types that the A overlay provides. So this is basically reinforcing our policy objective to say adaptive reuse of historic structures is a great thing. Let's do that. When faced between demolition and replacing with a multi-unit building, when council has to review those demo review situations, we didn't want to put them in the quandary of trying to balance between those two policy objectives. They're both in our comp plan. So this is basically stating the intent rather clearly that adaptive reuse is great. Demolition, when that happens, would just result in the replacement with a single house. For the cottage clusters, the important distinction or the thing to keep in mind here is that these changes would apply across the city. So this is inside and outside the A overlay, inside and outside the R25, R5, and R7 zones. And it should be noted these are currently allowed, but we've made some refinements to the process and some criteria, as well as added the ability for ADUs to be created. So we've reduced the review type for most of these proposals from a type 3 review to a type 2X review, and that means basically a shorter process time and less, there's no public hearing required. The decision is made by staff, but the criteria are the same for either of those. The other part of that is we basically aligned it with a subdivision. So if you have a 10 lot subdivision, you would go through a type 2X review. If you had a 10 unit plan development with the same structures on it, but no property lines dividing those structures between each other, that currently goes through a type 3. We would be leveling that, making it equal to a subdivision as a type 2 process. Also, because these situations are not quote unquote houses, even though they look like houses, because of the lack of property lines on that site, this is considered a multi-dwelling development with detached primary structures. And the way our code talks about that, you can only have an ADU with a house. So we've fixed that little inconsistency. And so now detached primary structures on a multi-dwelling development site are also allowed an ADU as if they were a house. The last refinement was adding criteria for.
Repeat that. I'm sorry. One last time.
It's a strange way to talk about houses.
So like the 10 lot subdivision example that you were giving, if you do a 10 lot subdivision, each house can have an ADU. This proposal would allow a 10 unit cottage cluster, each with its own ADU also. The lots are not being subdivided because that's the
So basically, you could have 20 structures then. Is that what I'm following? That's what I was.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep, just like a 10-lot subdivision.
got it.
If we're in the A overlay zone, are they on par there too? If they're in the A overlay zone, are they also on par?
So this is interesting. Within the A, the ability to have 3 units on a lot, you don't get that with a multi-dwelling development situation. So we're talking about one lot with multiple units already on it. So there's a little bit of a new discrepancy between lots created in a land division and multi-dwelling development.
Right. I'm staring on that one a little bit. Thanks.
Okay, I think that's it for our housing choice topics. Any questions on those
See all these
proposals?
hands up. So let's go ahead and go this way around this time.
We'll pass up the opportunity.
We'll get to your parking lot next.
Why cottage clusters and not courtyards as a building type? Why wouldn't we
Gotcha.
allow courtyard apartments in the same?
We
kind of
do through the same kind of process. The plan development process allows for multi-dwelling structures, multi-dwelling development, and in some cases some commercial uses. So it's already an allowance. I have not seen anyone attempt to do it.
I think what's fundamental to this proposal is that we're keeping with the single dwelling zones having structures on them that look like single dwelling houses. And when there's something that looks completely different than a single dwelling house or even functions in a single dwelling house, then the type 2 plan development process is there for those situations so that the community can have public input and they get notice on something different occurring in those zones.
Okay, thank you.
I think we've had this conversation before. Why not a fourplex on a corner lot? Why stop at triplexes?
Well, that's
I've
not.
seen lots of fourplexes, including one I live in, that look like a single family dwelling.
That's not out of the realm of possibility. One thing that we tried to do, we've already adjusted the definition of the distinction between a multi-dwelling structure, which used to cover 3 units and now covers 4 and more. So triplex is its own thing. There's a little bit of an advantage, although triplex gets into the dicey area of the commercial code. But separating out the 4th unit, the ADU in that affordability proposal, just makes it a little less convoluted for meeting some building code standards. But
And I think another thing that you'll need to struggle with, as we have struggled with, is that if 4 is okay, you'll hear feedback. Now the structure's not big enough. It needs to be bigger. So it was that continual balance of, okay, like originally our proposal was a duplex or a triplex within the same parameters. And we heard a lot that, well, that's not big enough for a triplex. So we've bumped that up a little bit. So if we want to allow a fourplex, I think you'll get the same feedback. That's not big enough. And so now you're making that even bigger. And if you're making that bigger, why not make the duplex bigger? And so you get into this
why not
discussion.
5?
Just if I may, the simple answer to your question about why not 5 is state law defines and lending defines 4 units as a residential structure and 5 as a commercial, I believe. So there is a sort of a legal basis for saying 4. There's a distinction between 4 and 5. Now, that doesn't answer your question about they get bigger and bigger, but there is sort of a practical benchmark between a fourplex and something bigger. And Mike's house does look just like a single family house. I walk by it all the time.
So my question is around the historic portion. So what again was the definition for being a historic resource?
Oh, gotcha. There are 3 levels, well, probably more levels of historic resources, but generally there's capital H, as Brandon likes to say, capital H historic resources, which are designated contributing structures within a historic district, or they can be a landmark, and those have the highest level of protection. The next level down is conservation resources, like a contributing structure in a conservation district like Kenton, or a conservation landmark. There are a few of those. And they don't necessarily require historic resource review. They are often subject to additional community design standards when alterations are made. And then below that are properties that are identified on our historic resources inventory, which has no regulatory effect. They are basically on an inventory to be noted. They serve as information to develop future historic districts or designations for landmarks. Our current HRI is a little out of date, and that's one of the projects that Brandon is working on. But what this project does is pick up this existing inventory and allow for some additional flexibility for those resources. The stick about not allowing redevelopment of that lot into multiple additional housing types wouldn't apply to the HRI properties because there is no historic Goal 5 resource designation that applies to them. So we don't really have the authority to further restrict the redevelopment on them, but we can provide incentives to not.
Okay, thank you.
My question is around affordability. Why 80% versus 60?
We can talk about that a little bit more. So one of the things we've discovered is the affordability proposals we have right now are pretty difficult. They're pretty high bar to make work. We're testing it, and the Housing Bureau folks, when we get closer to the end, might have some more feedback for you on that. But the deeper level of affordability makes that a tougher and tougher threshold to overcome in terms of making that project work.
And then who's going to administrate we've got thousands theoretically of these single family out there.
That's why we brought the Housing Bureau folks.
So they're going to answer that question a little bit later.
Yes.
Okay.
Or
thanks.
now, if you like. Should we do it now?
Well, we can do it later or now. It doesn't matter.
Let's do it later so we can get through the rest of the proposal and we can do that.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Thanks.
For the like Piedmont Conservation District where I used to live, is every house in that district one of the lowercase h homes?
No.
Okay.
Oh,
Uniformity. Fantastic.
So some of them would be contributing structures and some would not. So that's what the inventory says. So it's not, uniform throughout the district.
Okay, so currently the capital H homes, there already is a code provision saying that any one of them can be divided internally into up to 1 unit per 1,000 square feet of lot area. Did you consider just extending that to these other lowercase h properties and simplifying your work a little bit?
There's a process that goes along with that.
It's only been done once.
Yeah. I think
but with more properties available, it might be done more often.
We'll get
on the tip of my tongue. But
yeah, we'll get back to you about that.
Okay. I've got a lot of thoughts about the courtyard question, but I'll comment on following up on what Chris said. You can do attached housing in a planned development, as you said, but it seems, if I'm getting correctly, under the way it's proposed right now, you wouldn't have available the accessory dwelling unit option because those are just for detached homes. So although the city does provide the flexibility in a planned development to have attached homes, some courtyardy shaped things, 3 in a row, by doing that, you lose the chance to get accessory dwellings even under this current proposal, which is disappointing.
For those multi-dwelling units. So you could have some apartments over here and then you can have houses each with its own ADU, correct?
Probably.
Probably.
But still,
probably
it's
something like that. But you
I'm
forego
trying to
the
look at,
units.
is it really parallel between subdivision and plan development? And I'm seeing various ways that it's not parallel in my mind. The A overlay is one example, and this is another one I'm seeing. And I've studied cottage clusters, and I can say that what's on the table now is not a cottage cluster code by any standard of other cities that have done cottage cluster codes. They usually offer additional density in exchange for smaller homes, half-size homes, and I'm a little disappointed that we're not seeing that in this proposal. There are some certain ways you can perhaps achieve that with the plan development, additional process, and make them all separate from each other.
To be honest, we when we were considering the list of issues that we had heard from the public about, it was a judgment call on whether we wanted to devote more resources to cottage clusters, which aren't used as often as everything else that we're proposing today. So we decided to devote our staff resources to the scale, the A overlay, and the narrow lots.
Sure. Thank you. Before I forget, I just want to applaud the work you've done. I mean, the volume and minutia and the what weaving is mind-boggling. As I listening, I'm still trying to learn, so I'm still a few steps behind you. That said, I want to go back to Andre's issue about the affordability provision, because I guess I'm somewhat skeptical about how this would work. But let me. I wrote down sort of a series of assumptions, and I kind of like to get your sort of philosophical response. I'm assuming, my assumption is, with this whole proposal, we'd like to see more diversity of housing types in the neighborhoods, more duplexes, more ADUs. Just we want to see a flowering of diverse housing types.
Correct.
Okay. And one consequence of that will be more density, more housing units per square foot of dirt. We're going to try to increase our density. And now we get into the sort of planning economic debate that's been in the newspapers a lot lately. By simply increasing the supply of housing, particularly smaller types of housing, we're going to contribute to affordability of housing in a macro sense. More housing units, more smaller housing units, more density. The cost of housing across all levels will come down somewhat. That's sort of the economic philosophy. So we want that to happen. But when we make a condition of making that happen, you've got to have your specific unit has to be affordable at 80%. So we want you to do 2 units or 3 units, but there's a price tag to do 2 or 3 units, which is you have to make it affordable. And as you honestly said, there's a lot of practical difficulties in going around the city, and every small developer and every small homeowner who wants to do a duplex and bump it up to triplex now has a mandatory affordable unit that has to be tracked, and the Housing Bureau is going to have staff. And it's, as I think Andre said, and you kind of acknowledged, that's really a cumbersome process. From the bureaucratic side, it's cumbersome. From the homeowner side, it's cumbersome to keep track of what's the income of my renter. Someone's moving out. I have to go back to the Housing Bureau, get them certified. It's hard enough in inclusionary housing to do that in large-scale units where you have professional management. I think it's going to be impractical, and I'm wondering what the cost-benefit is. My fear is we will be, with this one provision, we will be discouraging that extra unit or two, and in exchange, we'll get a really small number of affordable units that will be really hard to track and manage.
Can I quickly ask a clarification?
Mm-hmm.
Is it mandatory or optional incentive?
So that was the first part of my response.
Well, it's mandatory if you want that extra unit. If you want an extra FAR.
If you want to go from
FAR?
3 to 4 units, or you want to go from a 0.5 to a 0.6 FAR, that's where the affordability requirement is.
So I guess I'll try to cut my monologue short.
One more
Sure,
clarification to that. It's not that you have to provide it on site. You can pay a fee in lieu. So they can pay a fee in lieu and then not have to deal with the administrative headache.
To encourage, incent, see more of this housing type, but we're going to pull back on that encouragement by making you pay extra money into affordable housing fund or provide affordable unit. I'm just nervous that we're undermining we're not really going to contribute in any significant way to affordability And we're, in fact, as some argued with inclusionary housing, we're undermining it, because for every affordable subsidized unit we get, if we don't get 2 or 3 more market rate housing, it's a net loss. So again, I guess on this scale of project, I'd like to get some more comfort level about, yes, we can make this work, that we sort of thought through models, and maybe the Housing Bureau is going to overcome my skepticism, and I'll feel more comfortable that we're going to be gaining more than we're losing by putting affordability into the mix of this.
Jeff,
So-
I think one of the things that I think they would say, that we have all talked about, because we had the same discussion in house many times, was that the cost benefit of having, let's say, the triplex on the corner made sense. If you added a fourth, it became a negative unless you added in the benefit of it being affordable. So we wouldn't have gone for the fourth unit at all. You're already getting 3, you're already getting all the benefits of adding an additional unit. But what we said was the negative of potentially more impact on the neighborhood, because 4 is beginning to be questionable on a corner, was overcome by having that be an affordable unit. So that's how we looked at it.
Well, I'll cut this short, because I suspect not everyone's as interested in diving into this, but I would be interested maybe offline to understand a little bit more of the discussion and how you got there. I have one more quick question, I promise. It's why do we believe we should be regulating internal ADUs? I want to convert my basement, put a bathroom down there, put a kitchen unit in there. Why does that need to be regulated, other than through a standard building permit? But in terms, are you going to regulate the square foot? Does that count against my square footage?
Good news for you, Jeff.
What?
At least in terms of the basement. So one of the issues that came up, I think, during the accessory structures project, and has been a concern repeated by BDS through their applications and permits they've reviewed. When people are converting basements to an ADU, there's the 75% of the primary or 800 square foot cap. And this has resulted in some cases where parts of the basement get walled off as unusable area, or areas get designed to be jointly used by both units. When you're converting a basement, from our standpoint, we saw the point that the exterior impacts of that basement conversion are not affecting anybody. So if it's bigger than 800 square feet and it's matching the entire first floor of the house, we thought that was fine. So we've added in an exception. Again, it's another existing house retention sort of incentive. If you have a house that's at least 5 years old, you can convert your basement, and you're not limited by that size limit. But it's still regulated in terms of you can only have one down there, one ADU.
Is that what you meant by regulated,
Well,
the
I guess
size?
you tell me,
Because
what are we regulating, I guess, in terms of, if I have a single family house, my basement, I could move 3 of my kids down there and put them all in the, cots, or I mean, what's the thinking that we're regulating the conversion of a basement?
I would suspect there's some people would argue parking is a pretty big issue when you start adding a different residence onto a lot, and that you're now adding parking burdens to a neighborhood. But you guys probably need to weigh in as to whether you heard that kind of feedback or not.
I guess it seems to me with this proposal, there really isn't much of a regulation. Every house can have an ADU, and it can be as big as you want if it's in the basement.
Okay.
If it's an older house. So I think this proposal is deregulating the basement ADU. But certainly, as we're starting to talk about duplexes and new construction, what's the difference between a house with an ADU and a duplex? Well, at BDS, they want to be consistent with the other within their bureau on building code requirements. If it's a duplex, it has different firewall separations. Are we charging SDCs for one and not the other? So we try to coordinate across the bureau, so we're all consistently calling it an ADU, or we're all saying, no, this is a duplex across the board.
Gotcha. I can see the problem.
Yeah.
Though I think we will add something about no cots.
Well, if you're not adding a bathroom or a kitchen, is it?
Well, then it's
Well,
just
that's,
space.
That's
Yeah.
just space. Yeah.
This goes back to your issue of what's a family. Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question from the previous segment. Sorry for jumping around. So low attics don't count. High attics above the minimum height would count towards FAR. And I'm wondering if you can provide a little bit of background on why you got to that conclusion. From a design standpoint, it seems like perhaps there's a little bit of a missed opportunity there where it kind of incentivized two stories, and assuming you do a pitched roof, you could end up with just a regular attic that is unused. Whereas there may be an opportunity there to have essentially the same form or a similar form, house form, and if this is about primarily regulating the how this volume is perceived from the outside, you could have essentially the same volume on the outside but more square footage on the inside if that was not counted towards FAR.
I'm still trying to get my mind around the TARDIS here. It's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. What we have heard is some concern about the FAR potentially leading to more flat roof type development, that people are not going to want to lose some square footage on their gables, under their gables. It's a little bit complicated. I think let me skip back a couple dozen slides here. This might help us. Because there's a difference between what the building code counts and what floor area counts. Okay. Oops. So in the image in the lower left-hand corner, floor area would count that area that's basically X'd, right? Because they have to have at least 6 feet 8 inches.
Mm-hmm.
The building code says that for your space to be habitable, your attic space has to be habitable. You can have knee walls that are 5 feet tall. Starting at 5 feet on the outer edge, up to that 6 feet 8 is fine for square footage, as long as that area is not more than 50% of the total square footage of that attic. So sorry for the rather convoluted explanation, but there is a little bit of benefit for the FAR. So if you have a gable, you're actually picking up a little square footage under those lower roof lines that's not counted for FAR, but still would qualify for habitable space under the building code.
But I think what Commissioner Bartolos was getting to is, does that have to be finished space? So if it's unfinished or finished, it's treated the same way.
Right.
So we're not talking about finished space. If you build a 2.5-story house, 2-story, and then the attic is unfinished, it's still counting towards FAR for the X area. If it's finished, same. So it's still controlling the bulk from the outside the same way.
Yeah, I don't mean to beat us to that, but my point was slightly different. I mean, basically, when you build, and again, your point about flat roofs is well taken, but I'm talking mostly in terms of just a regular construction with a pitched roof, where you could have an attic that's usable versus an attic that's not usable. Just have a truss, and that doesn't count at all. So, but from a form standpoint, the two homes could actually look exactly the same, minus perhaps a window or a dormer or something like that. So as we get deeper into this, and maybe we just follow up this separately, but it seems like it might leave some opportunity on the table for using that volume really to its full extent.
Right, you're talking about a vaulted ceiling versus having a floor, not whether it's finished or unfinished in the attic.
Right.
Correct. And other jurisdictions do go with a cubic yard maximum areas. Also, we've seen that a lot. We didn't want to go there. That's even more complicated.
I will say one of the, as I'm fielding questions coming from the public on our Measure 56 notice, one of the common questions is, does it matter if the basement, it's more about the basement, but does it matter whether it's finished or unfinished? And a little bit of our position is we don't want to be trying to determine what counts as finished versus unfinished, what level of improvement. That's the tax assessor's problem, not our problem. So when it gets to the attic, it's sort of the same position, that if you've created the space, you can improve it to be usable as floor area, or it'll count as floor area even if it's just trusses up there. And maybe that's not perfect, but at least from an exterior form standpoint, it's kind of counting the same thing the same way.
Andreas, do you have any questions? And then we're gonna throw it back to you guys because we're getting short on time.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been trying to listen a lot on this project because I recognize how complex it is, and I appreciate all the work that BPS has put into it. On bonuses, something I've been hearing is there's been conversation about scaling FAR bonuses to scaling FAR to the number of units provided. So you provide more units, you get more FAR. And you addressed a little bit why you didn't go down that road, but could you talk a little bit more about your thought process and why you don't think it was a good idea to increase FAR with the number of units provided on site?
So another sort of operating principles, and Sandra talked about the 2.5 story was our objective, our gold standard for a house. We also started with the premise, once we figure out the size of this box that's appropriate for neighborhoods, then we start talking about the number of units that are in it. And if we took the opposite approach of talking about a very small box that was 1 unit, bigger box that's 2, bigger that's 3, bigger that's 4, we are kind of mimicking what's multi-dwelling zone, how the multi-dwelling zones function a little bit. So we were kind of leading with the compatibility issue and following with the housing type in that regard.
Thank you. And I've also been hearing some concern in the community about the affordable housing bonus being sufficient to incentivize development. Is that something that staff has talked about at all?
We've talked a bunch about it. I think the question still remains, and I think there's going to be more conversation on that. And maybe, again, when we have the housing folks up here, we can expand on that.
Would this be time to talk about the areas in the A overlay, or would you want questions on that later?
Why don't we do that after I share the methodology to make sure we're solid on what method we use to map it.
That's good.
All right. So we are moving on to narrow lots. And Sandra reminds me, by this time we usually have run out of steam. So just breathe, stretch a little bit.
And this is usually when he passes it off to me.
That's right.
With an exhausted audience.
So a little reminder about what narrow lots are. These are lots that are less than 36 feet wide. When we're talking about historically narrow lots, these are ones that were platted a century ago before we had zoning in place. They're typically 25 by 100 foot platted lots. They already exist, so no land division is required. They are considered substandard for the R5 zone because they're not 3,000 square feet and they're not 36 feet wide. But there are some existing rules that allow some development to occur, which we'll talk about in a moment. Proposal 9 is to rezone approximately half of the 14,000 historically narrow lots. So on this map, the orange areas are showing existing R2.5 zoning, which is approximately about 8% of our single dwelling zone land area. The purple are the rezone areas, which comprise about 2 additional percent. And the crosshatch areas are the remaining historically platted lots that would remain R5. We looked at the rezone areas predominantly with pre-platted areas and lots that were very close, a 2 to 3 block distance of frequent transit, commercial nodes, or community amenities like parks, schools, and so forth. So just to show how this plays out, this diagram is showing an existing block condition. Below that is how the current R5 rules apply. So if you look at the numbers across the top, lot 1 is basically comprised of 3 platted lots, and there's an ability to do a property line adjustment and create 2 lots without having to wait 5 years because each of the resulting lots is not substandard in size. Number 2 is a situation where the house gets demolished, a skinny house can replace it, the other lot has to remain vacant for 5 years. Lot 4 is a standalone, or number 4 is a sort of standalone skinny lot that's just out there owned, not in common with anything else, and that can be developed. Number 6 is more of a typical, but more of the intended situation where you have a large yard area that can be developed with skinny lots. And then on corners, you can do a property line adjustment and do 2 detached houses. The bottom example is showing how this would play out in the R2.5 rezone areas. So we're proposing 4 attached houses on 25-foot wide lots. There is a provision to allow for flag lots through a property line adjustment. And we can have the corner lot property line adjustment, 2 detached houses on a corner like that. Conversely, for R5 lots now, in that first situation where you can have 2 houses, you wouldn't be able to because none of those lots are large enough to be established before you move the property line. So this would further restrict development on those skinny platted lots. The 5-year vacancy rule goes away so that number 2 remains a house. You can only have a single house on the pair of lots. The standalone lot is a standalone lot, and there are exceptions that would allow that to be developed. Lot 6 would now have just 1 additional house versus the 2 skinny houses. And on a corner, you can still have attached houses on a corner and use a property line adjustment to do that. It's a lot to digest, but there you go.
Could you just explain again which was which and what was the difference between those two?
Yeah, so I think the best way to think about this is the situation we have in current R5 zoning rules is where you have a vacant lot or where you can move property lines around, you may end up with this infill and you have really no way of anticipating where that's going to happen. You would have to be able to, I mean, as a neighbor or even a property owner, you would have to understand the underlying plat. You would look at a tax map and you wouldn't see necessarily your platted, well, I guess you can see the platted lot lines, but to understand whether or not there are legal lots or legal lots of record or developable, it's pretty confusing. And so the resulting development pattern that we see is all of a sudden there's a pair of skinny houses popping up in the neighborhood and people have said, wait a second, how are those being built on 2,500 square foot lots in the R5 zone? So this proposal is really trying to put some transparency and predictability around where that development would happen, and then the next set of proposals talks about what it would look like. So the big distinction here is in R5 zones, you would typically expect to see 5,000 square foot lots being developed. And in areas where we're rezoning, you would expect to see 2,500 square foot lots. So that's the real distinction. So with the proposed rezones, about 6,800 lots citywide being rezoned to R2.5, we want to talk about ways to improve the building design on these narrow lots. So on pairs of narrow lots that are 25 foot wide or less, when they are vacant, when they're both vacant, a pair of attached houses would be required. When precluded by pre-existing development, a detached house would be allowed. So if you've got a situation where you've got development on both sides of you, you can still have a detached house. If the lots are wider than 25 feet wide, a detached house is also allowed. In those cases where a detached house is allowed, the height limit for the detached house would be related to the width of the house itself. So a 15-foot wide house is limited to about 22.5 feet tall. As the house gets wider, the roof line can get taller. It just sort of helps keep that proportion, that relationship intact. Our third parking proposal. So with narrow lots, these present considerable challenges when trying to park vehicles, from curb cuts and lost on-street parking to paved over front yards and dominating garage doors. We are proposing on these lots, on-site parking is not required, and that parking and vehicle area would be prohibited between the building and the street. So no street-facing garage, no driveway, no parking pad. So this image is basically showing some options. Alleys are always awesome. Parking through a shared driveway between two buildings, or on a corner lot, you have the ability to park behind the structure. Elsewhere, so narrow lots are not just all we see in the R2.5 zone. There are other areas of existing R2.5 zones that have larger lot sizes. And R2.5 is a pretty high-performing single-dwelling zone, but there is a relative lack of it. So I mentioned 8% of our single-dwelling zones, 10% with the rezones. So to ensure a more efficient use of the R2.5 zone on sites that are larger than 5,000 square feet, when you are redeveloping new development, 2 units would be required. So that could either be provided through a house with an ADU inside or outside, or a duplex unit on that lot. Property owners could also choose to divide the lot and develop those lots separately, but we didn't want to mandate a land division would be required in these situations. When dividing these larger sites, the R2.5 zone really anticipates attached houses, which are difficult to achieve on 36-foot wide and wider lots. So when attached houses are being proposed, the minimum lot width is being reduced from 36 to 25 feet and 20 feet for those interior lots. So if you have 4 in a row like that, the 2 middle ones are 20 feet wide. The pairs of attached would be 25 feet wide. And our last proposal will allow properties with an existing house to retain the house and use a property line adjustment to create a flag lot. This is not allowed in our code today. The idea is to give property owners the ability to keep their house and potentially build on or sell the separate lot without the added expense of a land division. The house on the rear lot would be limited in size to mimic what is generally allowed as a detached accessory dwelling. And that gets us to our narrow lot questions.
Before we go to questions, do you have any other
We got
presentation?
more. We got the map.
So
we
why don't you
could-
keep going?
And we don't necessarily need to go through the map. It's all in the staff report, and the methodology that we would be sharing is all in section 5 of the staff report. So I don't need to walk through it unless you feel that you want us to walk through it of how we developed it.
Do people find it would be helpful to walk through the methodology?
I think we'll get a lot of questions in public testimony about it.
So why don't you keep going, and then perhaps what we'll do is then we'll give you our further follow-up questions at another date. So we can either just quickly go around, we'll see how long it takes, or follow up in writing.
Okay, so let's just skip to that. And sorry, Chris, you want us to, it all adds up to this, the park. You want to do that real quick?
So real quick, the parking summary, what's shown in sort of the black font there is currently 1 space per dwelling unit, except if you're within 500 feet of a peak service transit, which is a little different than frequent service. No parking is required for an accessory dwelling unit, and no parking is currently required for historically narrow lots. Our changes are in blue, so if you are providing parking on those historically narrow lots, it would be prohibited between the building and the street. There's no parking required for A overlay housing types, and no parking required for lots on alleys. But if you are providing it, you must use the alley.
So do you have an estimate of what percentage of lots in these zones will have required parking?
So what's left is basically, what's left is basically single units that are further than 500 feet from a big service route.
Right, so a house further than 500 feet from transit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so mapping the A overlay, and one of the reasons we wanted to walk you through the methodology, and as I explained, it's in section 5 of the proposal. There were 5 steps that we took to mapping the overlay. The first step was defining what the base boundary was, and this was the conceptual boundary that we had a lot of our public discussion about, and the one that we took to City Council. We proposed quarter-mile boundary from centers, from corridors with frequent bus service, from max stations, and is that, I think that's it, right? Yeah, from max stations, corridors, and centers. We also looked at the housing opportunity map in the comp plan, and areas that had medium to high opportunity areas that were, even if they were slightly further than quarter mile from the bus service, we added those in. So that defined our, what we called the bubble. And the next thing we did was to adjust that bubble based on zoning. So we knew that the proposals that we were contemplating only affected single dwelling zones. So we did not apply the overlay to commercial zones, industrial, institutional zones, or any of the other base zones that aren't affected by the regulations. The third thing we did with this step was to ensure that we didn't create split zoned properties, and we followed street lines whenever possible, so it's not mid-block. and we tried to ensure that there's a logical zoning boundary. So we're taking this bubble and starting to define it and which properties were in or out. So that was step 2. Step 3 was looking at development constraints. We looked at over 50 development constraints, and this is where our service bureaus really worked closely with us. There were some base constraints that automatically remove the A overlay from the properties, like as sewer conveyance limitations, 100-year floodplain, natural resource inventory, and such landslide hazards and wildlife hazard areas. So that was this constraint map, and that's what the dark purple is showing on this map. Finally, we adjusted the boundaries by district, and this is where our district liaisons also helped us out with, and looking at each of the districts and adjusting the boundaries based on where smaller, for example, neighborhood commercial or amenities such as parks and community centers were located, and where it made sense to have additional housing types. And that's what that step is. Finally, the one that you'll probably be hearing a lot of testimony about is in reference to these blue areas. The map was evaluated in its total for the potential displacement impacts on vulnerable populations and adjusted to lessen that potential impact. The result is that we are not proposing to apply the overlay to the blue areas on this slide. There are 3 of them. Those areas have lower access to opportunity and a higher percentage of vulnerable populations that we discussed last time. Higher percentage of renters, higher percentage of persons of color, lower income, and lower education levels. And that is that's what the map proposal is. What we did hear about in most of the comments, and what we suspect you'll hear about, is that people are advocating that the A overlay be applied to these blue areas, but only if programs are in place. So in your proposal, there is this map, but also some concepts for what programs could look like to mitigate for the risk of displacement. And I'm summarizing those here, and there's a couple pages about it in the report. And those programs were divided into what kind of support could we provide homeowners in those areas that are getting the A overlay, and what programs could we provide renters in those areas. So for homeowner support, we thought of technical assistance support on how to build an ADU. Where could you build an ADU? So all the things that we've been talking about, it's hard to wrap your head around. So some technical support for homeowners, and some potentially some financial assistance to homeowners for home repairs, loans to build additional dwelling units, or down payment assistance to get people into homeownership opportunities and grow some wealth. The support for renters of single-family houses were more education programs about tenants' rights and financial literacy in those areas. And there's an idea in there to do a pilot program that gives priority of the affordable units that are being built through these allowances, to give priority to households that have been displaced from those same neighborhoods to be able to reside in those affordable units. So those are just some ideas that staff brainstormed about, and would need further development, of course, if we were to pursue them.
Yeah, all of the assistance examples you gave, I know at least one nonprofit in town, the Portland Housing Bureau, provides, I think, all of those sorts of assistance. So are you coordinating with them and others on that issue, the assistance?
Yes, and I think it depends on where. I think these programs, I think, are needed regardless of this project, and that's the reality of what. So we're coupling it with this project, but really, these programs need to take place whether or not this project even moves forward. Not that I'm saying it wouldn't, but yeah.
So do you have any other items?
No, that is it, and we could definitely ask for maybe have the Housing Bureau folks join us.
Well, I'm a little bit concerned about time at this point. So I'm thinking we can stretch it for another 5 minutes. What I'd like to do is perhaps let's just go around the horn just let people ask you questions. Let's not worry about necessarily answering them, just so
Okay.
that we can get them followed up on. And then if we've got a little bit of time after that for Housing Bureau to come up, we'll do so. Since I keep starting my right, I'm going to go left.
That's great.
So thank you. I find the conversation around the programs to be really encouraging. I think it's come a long way from when I first began hearing about residential infill, and it definitely feels like steps in the right direction. With the anti-displacement programs and in Section 5, when you talked about the proposed conditions for future expansion, I think what I'm worried about there is timing. I think that when you don't lead with equity, it's hard for equity to ever show up, and I think it happens similarly with anti-displacement programs. In the briefings leading up to this project, we heard about direct examples in the past of when the city had chose to start with investment and follow up with community programs, and a lot of times those don't come around. Funding is difficult to secure, costs increase, and so I'm concerned about saying we'll add this in later, especially without a more detailed plan of where this funding would come from. Because like you mentioned, these programs do exist, but the challenge is funding them. And so it seems, I think, a little bit difficult to just say we'll add it in later without having an idea of where those new funds or where that increased support is going to come from. On a different note, I've also been hearing from members of the community concerns about excluding the 100-year floodplain outright. There's been conversations about in Lentz, if a corner of a property is in the floodplain, there's a lot of work around the floodplain and trying to help homeowners and people living in the floodplain. And I know there's also been conversation about whether this project could provide assistance there. And so I'd like to hear more about that and hear staff respond to what people are suggesting.
Well, a second Andres' point about perhaps thinking of programs now rather than later. And I also share the concern about the displacement risk areas, and I expressed this before, I think, as a concern. I'm not sure if excluding certain areas, especially in the eastern side of town, has almost like an unintended consequence. You could look at it the other way as these being kind of at the lower end of size and scale, and something that units that you could build yourself, with family, friends, etc., and maybe perhaps kind of less conventional types of funding sources. If that indeed actually provides some opportunity to grow and perhaps move forward. So I'd like to look at that a little bit more in detail and see if there's perhaps a more robust set of incentives or programs or things that we can do to fold into this proposal and perhaps expand that opportunity to, especially the eastern side of town.
Did you understand? Are you just talking about expanding the map or expanding the housing types? I just want to make sure I understand your.
The basically what the A overlay would cover.
The map of where the A overlay would cover.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and specifically around the displacement risk areas, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have one question, and you can answer it later. Maybe it's a quick answer. How many of these sites are served by alleys? Is there a rough percentage that?
Not that many.
Not many.
Not
So it's
that
pretty unusual to have an alley.
Mhm.
Okay. And then I think I've got it in all my notes and listening to Chris, but it might be helpful if you gave us a one-pager just on parking for all the zones, because I realize you organized it by sort of each issue, but it might be helpful just to, what's allowed now and what are you proposing, just because we know parking will be an issue, so it might be helpful.
For all single dwelling zones, not all the zones, you mean?
Yeah, it's probably asking you to do too much, so I wouldn't mind if you included some multifamily,
other ones are easier.
smaller,
The other ones are
multifamily.
easier,
I
okay.
get awfully confused about what's mandatory and what's not, but
And
yes.
and I think that's one of there's a lot of single dwelling development taking place in multi-dwelling zones, right? A lot. So when you see some of the houses built, sometimes they're not in the zones that we're talking about.
And I already raised my concern about understanding housing more, but that can be an offline.
Right. And you'll be overlapping with Better Housing by Design, which is talking about multi-dwelling. So, and we have some time in our agenda over the
I meant the
coming months.
affordability provision, and I'm sure that's already on your list.
Yeah.
And then I can't resist a quick editorial comment about these programs for anti-displacement, and obviously funding them is important, but I think the city as a whole is still struggling to figure out what is an effective program. So it's not just money, it's figuring out how do we make it work. So it's not as if we've got great plans on the shelf that we can't afford. I think we're still struggling as a city based on some recent hearings at the city council. We haven't figured this out yet, so it's not just a money issue. Thank you, and great work. It's interesting proposal.
Thank you.
So thanks for your efforts to bring it forward.
Well, respecting time constraints, I'm gonna have to send some things by electronic copy because I've got a lot of questions and we don't have much time. I think on the map, it would be really helpful. I've been asking for this for a while, just to have an overlay of the A overlay versus single family zoning. Right now, all the maps we've seen is A overlay over the city as a whole, so you can't tell where the white areas are industrial, commercial, mixed use, multifamily. So I've always had a hard time figuring out without seeing that picture. And on the adjusting the boundary, I wonder whether this is brilliant spatial analysis of all these different layers, and I wonder whether it's overthunk in some ways. It feels like looking down the list: sewer conveyance, 100-year floodplain, natural resources, all these factors, improved level of streets. I guess I want to acknowledge that in all these areas, if housing were a bad idea, well, in all these areas, we've been allowing houses twice the size of what's being proposed today for decades in all these areas. So if it's a really bad idea for housing, then maybe sometimes we just say no housing, or we should say with this code update, we're cutting the size of housing in half allowed, and we're allowing more kitchens and doors on it. So I'm trying to figure out how these are such big factors to adjust boundaries, whether all this analysis is relevant. If we've been allowing for decades houses that are 5,000 square feet in all of these areas, then why are we jockeying around on the boundaries for this? And I guess I have two little things. One is on the mini flag lot. It's an intriguing idea. I assume the genesis is to help preserve the existing house in the front. In practice, those lots, as I understand it, would be zoned for 2 homes. They're big enough for 2 homes, right? So if it's zoned for 2 homes, why not let someone build 2 homes on it? If the house in the back has to be small, that gives more reason for someone to say, screw it, I'm just going to get rid of the main house and I'll build 2 big houses on the lot. And because couldn't they just take the main house down and build 2 big houses on the lot? It's zoned for 2 houses. So I guess I'm feeling like that's a provision which actually is going to incent someone to throw up their hands and say, I'm just going to get rid of the house. Even though I know the intent is because you're basically putting a size restriction on the whole house in the back in a zone that fully allows 2 full-size homes. So anyway, I'm interested in more thought on that one.
Okay.
And the last item I'll just toss out there, which is a big picture thing, which the R2.5 zone is riddled with, it's really complicated. You can do stacked flats, you can do townhomes, you can get density bonuses. You really can get 3 units on each one in some cases in the overlay. Meanwhile, in the multi-dwelling code update, we're merging the R2 zone and the R3 zone into one zone. Why don't we just kick this over to the multi-dwelling code update? It would be long-term simpler. When in Portland's history we're ever going to be doing these 2 code updates at the same time within a month of each other? There's a historic artifact of having R2.5 in some part of the city, R2 outside, but effectively the idea that R2.5 is a single family zone really isn't the case anymore. We're regulating them both by FAR. It just feels to me like the way our code is organized, the middle housing concept works really well in that scale, R2, R2.5, R3. Why they would be in different code chapters with very complicated rules in the single family zone chapter, but pretty simple rules in the Better Housing by Design chapter. I think it might be possible to just catalog the differences between the two and maybe just kick it over to the other zoning chapter. And if you have to write some adjustments, because it's R2.5, it's got little special rules attached, it might long term be a lot simpler. And I can't think of another time where there'll be a chance to do this, at least in my lifespan. Thanks.
Is it on? Yeah. The affordability, I would like to hear or have the Housing Bureau talk about how they're going to administrate thousands, because I know they're troubled today given what they have to administrate, and how property owners, what standards they're going to have to meet for the affordability. So are these going to be reviewed each year to ensure that they're still livable, habitable? My concern is that if we just put a lot out there and say they're affordable, that there will be one or two bad apples that create inhabitable spaces that kind of taint the whole barrel of these, and we go south. So I want to understand the administration, want to understand the rationale for the 60 versus 80 a little bit better, relative to the comp code and what we're looking near, especially in East Portland, where 60% is probably more appropriate to. I understand the depth of subsidy, but I also understand 80% is probably gentrification, given the population at 60% or below on East Portland. So I'm trying to understand why the difference. The development constraints, the issue there very quickly is unimproved streets. And I'm trying just to understand if theoretically, PBOT would require for a new building sidewalks and curbs and all of that. And if that's still going to be a requirement for the buildings, that the house that is coming forward. If you build that house, a flag lot or the ADU, or if that, and if it is, my concern is if you get enough of them on a street, you get to a LID position, and potentially streets are very expensive and would be forcing people out potentially, because 51% wins an LID. So I'm trying to understand PBOT's position on all these new units coming into unimproved streets.
So I'm trying not to answer questions.
And on the A overlay areas.
Got it.
And the last is just to pick up on Jeff's comment on the programs, and maybe put a finer point on it. Our recent history in North and Northeast Portland on programs has, to quote council, been an utter failure in trying to have programs to bring people back to have affordability and stuff for African Americans in North and Northeast Portland. For us to, at least for me, to look at programs and say we're going to try to do the same thing out there without trying to figure out how do we even make the programs work, seems to be following the old adage, just keep doing the same thing and you keep failing. I just am really concerned that we're talking about affordability and programs, and it looks very, very similar to what was proposed in Northeast Portland and is considered a failure. So unless we've got a different toolbox and different people doing it and a whole bunch of stuff, I'm concerned.
Not to put pressure on the rest of you guys, but we're really running over. So if you could try to be brief, or if you're comfortable submitting your questions at a later date, that'd be fabulous as well.
Okay, I just have one question. I'm interested in what we think the uptake will be on the program. I know we can't know that, but is there a number of the current vacant lots that would have the A overlay that are not the narrow ones somewhere in here that I missed? Because you gave us some good stats on the narrow lot, so I'd like to see just something akin to that on those that would be R5A overlay that are vacant.
Narrow lots we hand counted.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah. And we had interns to do that all last summer. So we will put our minds together. We do know
just really, mostly just the vacant ones, because those would have the most potential to redevelop more quickly?
We
Maybe
can tell
provide her a map so she can hang.
so we can tell you we send 135,000 notices, and those are tax lots. And 7,600?
6,700.
6,700 were vacant.
But that's not the A necessarily.
That's not the
That's
A,
all of them.
right? That's all. 135,000 notices that we sent out. So that's 135,000 in R2.5, R5, and R7. And 6,700 were vacant, no addresses on those properties. 5%, yeah.
Okay, Mike.
I pass.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Remember that in the future.
I'll try and be fast. I understand the blue. I'm wondering why there's so much kind of white in East Portland. Is it mostly because of the fact that more than a quarter mile from centers, et cetera, so it really has to do with transit?
Can I do this one really quick? It's transit mostly, and then south of Division, it's the Johnson Creek Plan District where we run into some other issues.
Okay. And I was encouraged to hear you talk about programs, and that's been kind of my thinking. I'm not sure if the programs now are the same as what happened in Northeast Portland. I don't know, so and probably can't get into that right now. But I think of it as kind of like there's a possibility of keeping people in East Portland, it being anti-displacement, to have the right kind of programs that would allow people to build wealth and create units. So that's something to consider. And the one thing that I am worried about is that because of the fact that you don't want to do the wrong thing in East Portland, that we won't do anything in East Portland. So that's my big fear. But I really do admire the work that you've done, as has been mentioned by others.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you for this. So I'm going to use my parting shot here for parking. It seems perverse to me that essentially what we're winding up with is the least dense development type is going to be the one that requires parking. Now, I understand that the reverse of that is you're using waiving parking as a way to encourage density, so I get that. But since required parking essentially represents a cross subsidy, shifting housing costs onto or shifting transportation costs onto housing costs, I think all our policies militate against that. So I really want to tee up the question: should we have any required parking in single-family zones?
I will send you questions so we can move on. Appreciate all the hard work. I have to echo Katie's comment about I'm struggling a little bit with understanding the comments about displacement and yet the option of wealth creation. So I will follow up with you guys later on that. Thank you for all of your work and hard time. Appreciate it. Thank you, Matthew, Housing Bureau, for being here to answer questions. We will get you another time.
So I do want to say the next time we'll see you is on May 8th and May 15th for the public hearings. Our plan for those public hearings, and we'll talk with the officers about it on Thursday, is not to spend very much time talking and presenting anything. We have a lot of people who want to testify. We'll come with a proposal to the officers with how to manage that testimony, and we want to get word out to community members about how we can do that as fairly and as quickly as possible. So the 8th and the 15th, I think we'll just be listening to testimony. And then, so we'll keep these questions for later.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andre, understand you have to leave us. Appreciate you being here till now. Next item on the agenda is the manufactured dwelling park zoning project. Sorry, Tom, for leaving you all of a half hour.
All right.
No, we'll see if, is there a show of hands about anybody who can stay a little bit later? Nope. Well, how about this way? A show of hands of who cannot stay later if we run over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Looks like we'll still have a quorum, if I counted right there.
Okay.
Let's get rolling. Thanks.
All
Mike.
right. Thank you.
Tom Armstrong with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I have for you tonight a briefing on what we're calling the Manufactured Dwelling Parks zoning project. And this is a little bit different. We're squeezing this briefing in tonight before we've published our proposed draft and sent out public notices, mainly for managing your agendas and schedules and all the time that residential infill and better housing by design is going to take up. So we're giving you a preview tonight. The proposed draft will be sent out on May 7th, 35 days before the PSC hearing on June 12th. So what this project is it establishes a new multi-dwelling base zone specifically for manufactured dwelling parks. And this proposal requires comprehensive plan policy amendments, map amendments, zoning code amendments, zoning map changes, and some other changes to other city titles like tree code and sign code where it references multi-dwelling zones. And in this context, in discussing the proposal, I'll use manufactured dwelling parks, mobile home parks interchangeably, but it's basically any site that falls under state law and has more than 4 manufactured dwellings as part of an organized development. This project is one step, part of our ongoing effort to address housing and housing affordability. We have in the 2035 comp plan a specific policy that calls out mobile home parks and looking at what we can do to evaluate the pressures for redevelopment and looking to protect this as low and moderate income housing. It's part of a continuing work program that we've had in terms of inclusionary housing, residential infill, better housing by design, all taking our policy direction from our new comp plan. We have in the city, we've identified 56 different manufactured home parks. These come in all different shapes and sizes. There's over 3,000 housing units in these parks. We have big ones and little ones. We have old ones. About 2/3 of these parks have been built before 1980. There was a flurry of parks built in the late 90s. We haven't seen any new parks built since 2002. As I said, they come in all shapes and sizes. We have a lot that have 10 to 15 units, and we have a bunch that have hundreds of units in them. We've also looked at sort of, a displacement risk analysis, and you've seen this map before. The darker purple areas have higher levels of vulnerability. 50 out of the 56 parks are located in higher risk vulnerable neighborhoods. 55 out of 56 parks are located in parts of the city that have higher shares of people of color. So this really is a sort of low income, last opportunity housing type that we're looking at and wanting to provide for the long-term stability and protection for them. I will say, just getting into some of the other use issues, there are 4 parks located in employment areas. So this will slightly reduce our employment industrial land capacity by 6 acres. We have a 55-acre surplus in these areas, so roughly 10%, reducing that capacity by 10%. 3 of them are located in the Cully neighborhood, off of Killingsworth and Cully Boulevard on this map here. There's another one located down on 82nd Avenue, just south of the Springwater corridor, which is that green line running through there, the old railroad right-of-way. We have 6 of them that have sort of higher density zoning, that have some commercial mixed-use zoning, have R1 zoning in them, that essentially this will be a down zone. But it's basically a wash in terms of residential capacity, because we didn't, for the bottom 3 of these, we didn't even count. We considered that developed, didn't even count it as future development capacity, and there's a trade-off in terms of the density that will allow under this proposal versus what we were counting in the redevelopment capacity in our existing BLI. So as I said, the proposal is to create basically a new land use designation in the comp plan, identify it as a specific manufactured dwelling park, and then from there create a new base zone in the multi-dwelling section. That base zone will only allow one type of dwelling, and that's manufactured dwellings in a dwelling park. So very narrow. Right now, manufactured dwelling parks are allowed in the R2 and R3 zone, but you can also redevelop that under that zoning for townhouses or apartments, and so this would restrict that. We'll continue, or we'll allow for a limited retail sales and service use that's limited to recreational vehicle parks. Some of these parks today operate sort of a dual model where part of the park is an RV park and part of it is, and that's considered more of a short-term campground, less than 30 days short-term housing, and then the manufactured park is really more of the long-term housing piece of it. The other sort of uses that are allowed in the multi-dwelling zones under like our institutional categories, the community service uses, the schools, the daycares, all of those will be same as what's allowed today in terms of the limitations and the conditional uses that are there. So currently today, most, about 2/3 of the parks are in this R2, R3 zone that are allowed uses. 18 of them are non-conforming uses. So by switching them over, we'll provide more stability, more clarity in terms of what they can do when they're replacing units, when they're upgrading the park itself. Will provide a consistent set of development standards. In going, we've also done an analysis. We've based sort of the density of spaces allowed based on the R2 density. So there's quite a number of these parks, and in the report we'll document this, have extra capacity to add spaces. In addition to that, we're creating an opportunity to transfer that density to other multi-dwelling zones as a way to create some value there that can help support the long-term use of this. And so if a park doesn't have the space or has the sort of permanent interior roadway sidewalks that limit their ability to use these extra spaces, they can realize that development potential by transferring it to some other nearby within 2 miles multi-dwelling site. And then finally, the way we've set this up, that it will, to do something different other than a manufactured dwelling park, will require a comp plan amendment and zone change process. And that really is a type 3 process. It goes to a hearings officer and then it goes to city council for approval. And the key approval criterion is, again, sort of what we did when you look at a legislative project is you have to look and balance all of the comp plan policies and find that changing that use is equally or better supports the comp plan. And so it's a pretty high bar. We're going to a lot of effort to create this zone and put these parks in the zone. It's going to take quite a bit of effort to get them back out. So our process, as I said, we're going to publish a draft on May 7th. We're going to use the month of May for an outreach process that I'll talk about in a little bit. We have a hearing scheduled on June 12th. We're holding that hearing that same night. We have a hearing on the Better Housing by Design multi-dwelling zoning code proposal. We've located that hearing out at PCC Southeast to be nearer, closer to both where a lot of our multi-dwelling zoning is, as well as back on that map, most of these manufactured dwelling parks are out in East Portland, both in Northeast and far Southeast Portland. We're hoping to do both a hearing and a recommendation from you that night, given everything else on your agenda over the next couple months. And then we would expect to turn this around and take it to City Council over the summer. In terms of outreach, we are both sending Measure 56 notices to both the park owners and anybody that happens to own their own unit. So there's two different models here, and each park seems to have a mix. So there's typically a park owner, and then the park owner may own the unit itself and rent it out, or a person may own their unit and rent the space. Under Measure 56, even a person that owns a unit and rents a space, they have a tax ID number, they get a Measure 56 notice. In addition to that, our zoning code requires us to send a notice, and we're sending a postcard to every space in all of these. All of the occupants will get notice of this process. We've set up a map app layer and a testimony submitter and the postcard and the notices will have instructions around how to do that. In addition to making the report available, we're doing some summary one-page handouts. We're going to get those at least translated into Spanish, and we'll look and explore other foreign languages as needed. We have the call center up and running for both the residential infill and the Better Housing by Design project, and we're going to train our call center call takers on this project as well. So there's one number that people can call. And then in addition to that, we're hiring 2 interns that are going to go out and canvass these mobile home parks to talk to the residents directly. And because I know in past projects where zoning has touched on, through the mixed use zoning projects or prior projects, whenever you start sending notices to park residents, it sets off concerns and even borderlines on panic. So we want to be able to get the information out, have resources available so people can understand what the implications are of this, and try and not alarm people as to what the intent is behind these changes. And with that, that's my presentation. As you can see, we brought a lot of friends here that have been encouraging us to do this project. And with that, I can take any of your questions.
So we'll do questions in a second. First of all, I want to thank all of you who have shown up tonight to kind of participate in this process. And I've seen a lot of parents trying to get good pictures. If you want to, one at a time, come back and get a picture back at your group, you're welcome to. So with that, let's go ahead and take some questions. Teresa?
So 2 questions. One, the canvassers will be Spanish speakers?
One will be a Spanish speaker for sure.
Okay, good.
Yes.
And then secondly, did you guys take a look at the unintended consequence that when we make this change, that it forces landowners to make decisions about their spaces in advance of changing regulations? Do we have displacement risk here?
There is that risk. That's one of the reasons why we're moving relatively quickly with this project and trying to, publishing a proposal on May 7th and trying to get it adopted by council within a 3 or 4 month time frame. There are some state law protections that it requires owners to give 12-month notice to residents when they're going to close a park and do something different. So there are some state protections in there as well. But I think in the end, sort of weighing the long-term risk of a slow drip of conversions and crises when one of these gets proposed to be converted versus let's do something now, the urgency, and if it triggers one or two owners to act quickly, I think we've sort of weighed everything and accept that risk in terms of the long-term benefits of this change.
So, but if I'm following you, if really we can get through this process as quickly as you're saying, and they have a year notice, unless they've already provided notice to anybody, there's kind of is it possible? I guess at this point,
it's possible. Well, what they would do is they would file a development permit and have the permit sit there while they go through their notice process.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, it's amazing how much overlap there is in that displacement zone we've been talking about, the blue area, and most of the parks are in that area. So that's another huge factor to be considered when we start talking about how we handle that.
Yeah. Ben, and then Eli.
If I understood it correctly, there is untransferable development rights within 2 miles of the property, so you can transfer excess development rights to another. You can send it over to another property.
Right.
Could you elaborate on the 2 miles limit?
So, and this is a policy choice for you that'll come more to light in the Better Housing by Design project. So right now in the multi-dwelling zone, we have a pretty limited area in which you can transfer that. And we're looking to at least move it to, I believe, what we allowed in the mixed-use zone for historic landmarks, which was a 2-mile radius. So we're trying to use that as a guidepost. The other consideration is, do you want to create an even wider market area and really consider the city to be two markets, if you will, the central city and areas outside the central city. And we don't want to address that policy question as part of this project, but it's certainly a question that'll come up in the Better Housing by Design, because there are historic and affordable and tree transfers in that project where what is that right area for the landing zone for those transfers? And is it 2 miles or should it be a broader area? And how do we define that area? But for this process, we're starting with that 2-mile radius.
Excuse me. Eli?
Well, thank you for everyone who came here, and I hope that when we have public testimony, we can provide translation services during that session. I think that the transfer of development rights, I've heard about this proposal percolating through, and I think that that's transferring development rights is a great policy solution here. I also want to point out that mobile home residents, especially in this situation, are doubly vulnerable. And one of them is to redevelopment of the site, but also owning a structure that oftentimes can't be moved can become a rent hostage situation. And so I'm hopeful that in parallel to this timeline that we can work on, that the Housing Bureau can work on another track to help address the other vulnerability that people have in the awkward situation where you own a piece of property that can't really be moved and the landlord can just keep jacking the rent up again and again and again. So I hope that that can be addressed in parallel. Thanks.
Well, that was an issue that Andres brought up in our officers briefing, and we do have Housing Bureau representatives here that can come talk about the other programs that they're working with for these manufactured dwelling parks.
And just as a placeholder, there is some crossover with residential infill project, and I guess I'll submit some thoughts on the manufactured homes and manufactured dwelling parks in residential zone, because I think there was a sort of a double standard between how those are treated in some very modern, very expensive homes with flat roofs and metal siding. They're treated pretty differently in the code. Neither of them objectively fits in, but the code certainly favors the expensive modern new house over the manufactured dwelling. So I'll toss out some comments on that related to the other project. Thanks.
Are there other questions? If not, maybe real quick, let's bring up, I assume it's Matthew, the Housing Bureau, to give us their thoughts, since we have a little time. Who would have thought? You went so quick, Tom.
Okay, so Matthew Schauble with the Housing Bureau. So, we've looked at this issue in 3 different categories with planning and sustainability. And one is looking at the land use and zoning component, which you have before you. The second is looking at the regulatory component, which is what local regulations can we pass to create protections on either the rent increase side, the rent increase of the dwelling unit side of things, the rent increase for the concrete side of things, or the actual sale or closure of the park. And then we've looked at it from a program standpoint and what resources can we bring to bear with regard to preservation of manufactured dwelling parks or assistance for the residents therein. And so you've seen the zoning concept. On the regulatory concept, unfortunately, we are fairly preempted in all of the respective areas by state law. So the state has a significant regulatory structure for the sale of parks and the displacement of the individuals who happen to own the manufactured dwelling unit, but they rent the concrete. And similarly, for individuals who happen to rent both the structure and the concrete, they're subject to state landlord-tenant law, as well as local landlord-tenant law with regard to mandatory relocation assistance. And so there's very limited regulatory options available, absent some change to state law, as well as some case law that has happened due to other local governments trying to legislate some regulation. On the program side, we don't currently have a standalone program for preservation of manufactured parks, but we do, our financing, when we put out financing or when we take emergency requests for financing, the preservation of a park would fall into our general preservation activities. And so when we're looking at preserving or rehabilitating affordable housing, we are looking for existing regulated affordable housing or affordable housing that's not currently regulated that will enter into an agreement in exchange for some sort of financing for either the acquisition or rehabilitation of the park itself or the structures. I think to the question, we have not looked at a kind of a program that could help people on a voluntary basis relocate their dwelling unit. They'll get relocation assistance under state law if the park is closing, but if someone feels like they're getting egregious concrete rent increases and wants to move their dwelling unit, and that's certainly something we could look into further, both in terms of the cost for relocation as well as trying to actually find an available space at an affordable price. So,
any other questions for Matthews? No? Eli?
I might take this offline. I've had discussions with a current senator who previously worked on this issue in the Oregon House, and he had some pretty thoughtful ideas that are not preempted by the state that we might be able to do, including guaranteed education for renters, that homeowners of parks would have to let renters know, for example, that their rent could be raised on a monthly basis, whereas they own a structure perhaps with a 10-year mortgage on it. And that there may be some areas where mobile home park owners may be reticent to provide that education, but they might be required to provide that education because it's part of the economic deal that the tenants are getting. So there might be, I could share some thoughts offline.
Certainly,
at
yeah.
my work. Thanks.
So Eli, that was interesting. And yeah, I was just wanting to make sure you were talking about the rent control, the idea that the state won't let there be any restrictions on how much people can raise rent. Is it the same? That's the same regulatory regime that applies to apartments, rental
Uh,
houses.
yes, and other just general preemption around regulating manufactured home parks.
Okay, so they're treated separately. Yeah.
If somebody rents if they own the structure and they rent just the concrete,
Mm-hmm.
there's an additional set of regulatory protections than if they're renting both.
Mm-hmm.
If they just are renting the structure and the owner owns the concrete.
And the protections go in which direction? I mean, you say
Sorry,
protections.
Protecting the renter around
Okay.
what the landlord has to provide, what information in the event that they are closing the park, the length of time for notice, relocation assistance, if they, those sorts of protections.
Okay, so sounds like it's more than just the usual rent control.
Yeah, it is. I would say if for a situation where somebody is owning, an individual owns their own dwelling unit, their own manufactured home, and they're renting the concrete, it's much more complicated than just the simple preemption on rent control or rent stabilization. Yes.
Any other questions?
Quick comment for those of you who have been here through the comp plan, the Portland plan and all. It is such a wonder to be able to actually come to this point where equity displacement, looking at these issues, is just our base. We all understand it, and it's a part of the implementation work we're doing, and that allows us now to move on a project like this in 6 or 8 months. It's like we can move fast, and so all that work you did that took years and years to provide that strong base is incredibly important. So thank you all for doing that.
Thank you, Tom, for this proposal and bringing it to us. Matthew, thanks for hanging in there with us.
Of
and
course.
joining us. And with all of that, we are adjourned for tonight. Thank you.